I'm slightly taller than Maya. Not by much. Got some heel. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this blustering morning, especially if you rode your bike here. I did not. I drove in from Stanton. But my name is Ann Cundy. I'm the Executive Director of the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission. And yeah, today marks the end of my first 2 weeks in that new position. I've been with the PDC for about 11 years, leading the transportation team. But what a great way to spend the day. CSPDC is a regional planning body that serves 5 counties, 5 cities, and 11 towns in the valley. And among a lot of the stuff that we do, we staff the regional transportation planning body for this subregion, and that's the Harrisonburg Rockingham MPO. And through that role, we have been working on these HR Bike-Walk Summits for a long time now. But it's been 4 years since we last hosted a summit. I could not be happier that the Bike Coalition and the Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley have breathed new life into this wonderful event and frankly improved upon those last several years of summits that we had before the pandemic. Working with Hale and Rob from ICAD and the steering committee on those past summits was some of the most rewarding work I did, leading the transportation team for the PDC. Hopefully soon I'll be passing the baton on that to new members of my team, but our commitment to this event is strong, particularly in support of our local governments who are here, Harrisonburg, Rockingham County, and our 3 towns there in the MPO. In partnership with the advocacy community and the business community in our ongoing coordination and collaboration with state agencies like VDOT and DRPT and DCR particularly. Yeah, that's better, right? So while this event has laid fallow for these last 4 years, but really in the last 12 years since we started these summits, this community has visioned, planned, and funded and built a lot of bike and ped infrastructure. We've widened and paved shoulders in the county for buggies and bikes. You've built out segments of the Bluestone Trail and the North End Greenway, bike boulevards in downtown, and even landed a highly competitive and prestigious RAISE grant for the street, right? So some pretty incredible stuff. You've accomplished a lot. And at the same time that your planners and public works staff and VDOT staff were building these projects, one of the most incredible groups of smart, motivated, strategic people that I've ever gotten to work with, and they just asked us to tag along, but that would be the Shenandoah Rail Trail Exploratory Partnership, got going and has been working so hard on this envisioned 48-mile rail trail corridor, right, from Broadway all the way to Strasburg. The energy and excitement around this 48-mile corridor and what converting it to a trail could mean for those 3 counties and those 9 towns along it almost broke the survey platform, y'all, when we put that out for, for public input a couple of years ago. We received more than 9,000 responses, overwhelmingly in support of this trail. We're sharing that message over and over again with local, state, and U.S. elected officials. We still really need all your help to magnify that message so that we can get that trail built, acquire that corridor, and get that trail built. So, anyway, moving on. A couple of years ago, some friends told me they were taking a mountain biking vacation to Bentonville, Arkansas. And having never been to Arkansas myself, I was, I don't know, surprised they have mountains in Arkansas. No, I'm just kidding. I know that they're in the Ozarks, but I was intrigued, and they explained that it has this world-class trail system, great restaurants, a lively downtown scene, that it was just an all-around great place to visit. And a couple of months later, at an MPO conference, which are actually really fun, I promise, I chatted with a peer from the Little Rock MPO, and I said they just traveled to Bentonville and went mountain biking with their family and had a great time. And I said, we've been trying so hard to build that same kind of momentum in the Valley. And he said, oh, well, you need to talk to this guy, Ryan Hale. So Kyle's going to introduce Ryan, but I hope that today you are going to listen to his story about how he and his partners moved their region from mostly focusing on those recreational trails towards opportunities for a wider range of people to experience trails, and how this approach not only expanded access, but also had this ripple effect in his community. It's a powerful story, and we hope that we can all draw some inspiration for our own hoped-for similar arc from becoming a place, or just to become a place where everybody can get outside to walk, ride, or wheel. So with that, I'll hand it off to Kyle to introduce Ryan. Thanks.
All right, it's going to be a little taller for you, Ryan. Okay, thanks everyone for coming. My name is Kyle Lawrence. I'm with the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition. It's really great to have everyone back at the Bike-Walk Summit, as Ann mentioned. And I first heard about Northwest Arkansas, much like Ann, because of mountain biking. Some of you in the room probably heard that. And that was a number of years ago. I heard about Bentonville mostly, one community there. But then more recently, the past couple of years, I've heard a lot more about Northwest Arkansas as a region. And that regional approach has been intentional. We'll hear that from Ryan a little bit. And it's not dissimilar to thinking about the whole Shenandoah Valley region. So we have some comparisons there. I think also what really came to mind was that Northwest Arkansas is now known for greenways, shared use paths, and a lot of connectivity to get around for daily life, for transportation, walking and biking. And then the other part with the trail piece, the dirt trail piece, is if you haven't heard about the trails there, you can go from downtown in these communities out, usually on trail, dirt trail connectivity out to larger systems. So some really neat things to learn from there. The theme of these summits has always been bringing folks in from other communities that we can learn from, hear about, be inspired by, learn what they did right, maybe what they learned and wish they could have done better. And so in that vein, we're excited to have Ryan here. Ryan spent a day with us yesterday along the Shenandoah Rail Trail corridor with 2 different meetings, one in Timberville, one in Strasburg. And we pulled together partners who were working on the corridor for the rail trail and talked about similar themes that we're going to get into today. So we had our rail trail focused, and now we're here in Harrisonburg. And so as far as Ryan, I first heard about Ryan from Ann, as she mentioned. But beyond that, so Ryan is a native of Northwest Arkansas, although he's not from there. If you ask the people who were born there, he'll get into that as well. And he played collegiate football, and then was actually on a Super Bowl team after that. And then when he came back to Arkansas, he was a commercial banker for a bit, and then started working with the Walton Family Foundation. So a lot of folks probably know that Northwest Arkansas has Walmart headquartered there, and the Walton Family Foundation has invested a lot in making the region a great place to live, work, and play, and that has been the Trails for Transportation and Recreation. So Ryan spent 5.5 years there working on projects, helping bring private dollars to the table, actually worked on their federal Tiger grant for the Racerback Greenway Trail. And then after 5.5 years there, Ryan started his own planning firm called Lane Shift. And so Lane Shift is a mobility planning and engineering firm. And one of the big things they do is bring people to Northwest Arkansas so they can experience what's going on there, be inspired by it, get excited about what's happening and what is possible. And so I know a number of months ago there was a group from the Richmond region that made it down there for a trip for a couple days. And we couldn't bring all of you to Arkansas, so we brought Ryan here. But it reminds me of things that have happened in our community in the past. It's been a while now, but a number of years ago, a group in Harrisonburg took city council members, planning commission members, city staff, local advocates to Davis, California on a similar trip just to see what's possible in a community that has far more biking trips as a percent of their mode share than a city like Harrisonburg. And so I think it's really important and powerful that we look at these other communities that are doing great things and learn from them. And that's why we're so excited to have Ryan here. and he tells people about the region and takes people to other regions as part of his career. So we're very excited. Hope you'll welcome Ryan Hale.
What a turnout. This is great. Thank you guys for setting aside some time. Rod, good to see you again. Setting aside some time out of your busy schedules. I know that a lot of your attendance here is not only that you love bikes and that they serve breakfast and that there's lunch available, so that's a bonus. I know when there's breakfast and lunch, I'm always making sure that that's on my calendar. We want to spend just a little bit of time with you, and looks like we need a mic. I talk with my hands. I'm an ex-defensive lineman, so I talk with my hands. Just speak up a little bit. Okay. I usually whistle at them. I have a dad whistle. So we're going to talk a bit about Northwest Arkansas and a little bit about that story. But this is bigger than just the story of Northwest Arkansas. So we're going to kind of look at that as a bit of a case study. And we've made some mistakes. There's been some things that we've done wrong. And as we look back on it, we kind of scratch our head and say, man, if we had that to do over again, we would do things a bit differently. So we want to kind of draw on some of those successes, some of the things that we did right there. And I say that in the terms of we, because this is kind of a heavy burden to talk about all that's happened there with one person. But we say we because there was an entire partnership and coalition of people, just like there is here, that's trying to move walking and biking forward in Northwest Arkansas. As Kyle mentioned, a little bit about us. We're a planning and design firm. I thought my degree is in education. I thought that I was going to teach and coach high school football and maybe go on and coach in college and possibly into the NFL. And life kind of took me in a different direction. And it's not good or bad. It's just life kind of took me in a different direction. And what I feel like is some of those things that I had a desire to do is teach. I'm doing that now. I get the opportunity to do that just in a little bit of a different space, working with professionals, elected officials, planning commission folks, city council members, to help them kind of figure out, just like coaching a high school kid on, okay, put your foot down, take this step, throw the ball this way. It's kind of what we're doing with a lot of cities that we work with, is doing that coaching. So 7 years ago, launched out Lane Shift with this idea of taking that passion of teaching, some of these unique experiences that I had in working in a highly politicized environment, to move these types of projects forward. And when I launched the company, you'll hear me talk about my dad. My dad's very important to me. He passed in July. But I launched the company, and he said, son, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm consulting. And that was, I think, code for unemployed to my dad. But 7 years later, we've had the opportunity to really work on some great projects and have a big impact. And I think we're wired as a company much more like a social enterprise. We just happen to be a for-profit company. But we're wired much more like a social enterprise, where when we have the opportunity to work on projects, it's actually just more fuel for us to continue to sustain our impact. And our impact is really, we want to create resilient people and places really through active transportation. And so in our design work and our planning work, sometimes there's this pressure to kind of move into other things, and we continue to keep that very focused on, this is our lane, this is where we want to be, and this is where we feel like our area of expertise and where we can have the most impact. So I want to share just a quick video that we put together that kind of gives a little bit of an overview of who we are as a company.
power of connection. That connection creates community, resilience, and prosperity. Because when you get down to it, a connected community is a strong community. We craft places where people can connect with nature and with neighbors. We build infrastructure and culture that supports biking and walking, because active transportation connects us.
It's kind of cute. Every time I watch that, that is my nephew's son, Bruce. And Bruce is full of life and full of energy. And that, what you saw right there for Bruce is literally 100% of the time. And so it's hard for me to watch that and not just giggle, because he brings so much energy. So a lot of the time that we want to spend is around this idea of creating connected communities. And some of the benefits that we can gain as people and as communities by becoming more connected. What we now are learning, which may seem somewhat intuitive, but somehow as humans, there's times where we can forget things. What we're learning now is the power of not just the physical connections within a city with transportation and infrastructure and that sort of thing, but we're learning the power of connecting with each other on an emotional level, connecting with each other on a spiritual level. And those are as important within our communities as the infrastructure is, and the ability to walk from our home to the grocery store, to be able to walk from our home to school. It's very important. But somehow, over many years, we've kind of forgotten a little bit how important it is to be in a room with people, to be able to talk, to be able to share about your life, to be able to share about what's going on in your world, things that you're working on, things that are important to you. And we believe that active transportation infrastructure and a connected community has both. It has both the ability to move from school to work, to the grocery store, to the coffee shop, but it also has the opportunity and the ability to help us connect as people. And we're learning more and more. We'll get into some of the data behind that. So, as we are a planning and design firm at Lane Shift, but we found that so many communities were hungry for, how do we do this work? Like, what's the first step? That's usually after a presentation like this, the hands go up, and the question is, what's the first thing we can do? I have an answer for that, but the answer is, personally choose to walk and bike more. Right? So we can get really spun up into, we need a budget allocation, we need an active transportation plan, and I would say each of you is a leader in your own right. Each of you has a circle of influence, and you have people looking at you. And if you want to have the biggest impact on this community and the people in this community, personally choose to walk and bike more. And then we realized that we needed a model, right? So I have all of this stuff. We needed a bit of a playbook. I'm going to use some sports metaphors, even though our team kind of cringes when I do that a little bit. Use some sports metaphors a little bit. We needed a bit of a playbook or a roadmap that we could work with communities and say, these are some steps that you need to be thinking about or considering. And on this journey to creating this connected community model, we realized that there's kind of two sides to the model. And it's the infrastructure side, because that's important. So we have to be able to feel safe and comfortable, and it has to actually be useful. And then we also recognize that there's this whole cultural aspect, that we have to create environments that are welcoming, inclusive, and encouraging to people on foot and on bike and mobility devices. Okay? So the connected community model, you're welcome to go on and snap the QR code if you want to follow along. It's going to be able you'll be able to see it in a little bit more detail. Hey Kyle, would you be willing to grab me a glass of water?
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me put you on the spot. So the connected community model, really two sides to the equation. Connected community infrastructure really needs to be safe, comfortable, and connected. And on the culture side, we have to develop a culture for walking and biking that is welcoming, inclusive, and encouraging. Now, let me preface, this is not an exhaustive list, right? There's going to be other things on there that you might want to tweak for your community or that's going to be important to you. Thank you. But these are questions that you can be asking yourself, that you can be asking your elected officials, you can be asking the staff at the city, and asking yourselves as a community. So on the safe side, does the space feel appropriate for all ages and all abilities? Now I know most everybody in here is going to be comfortable with that term, all ages and all abilities, but those are questions that we need to be asking when a design moves forward. Is this just designed for one group of people, or is this designed for people of all ages and all abilities? We won't go through each one of these. On the safe side, we talk about are conflicts minimized at intersections and along bikeways. The word friction. An active transportation network is probably a lot like a plumbing network in your house. You know, friction doesn't work well in a plumbing system. If you have friction in your plumbing system, it's going to back up. You're going to have a problem. Same thing is true in an active transportation network. We want to reduce those points of friction, in particular for lower confidence in newer riders. Comfortable, that can be somewhat of a subjective term, but we've tried to give you some questions that you can kind of ponder and think through. Is the flow of travel unbroken? Stopping and waiting? Are you having to stop at lots of different intersections? Are there places to rest and take respite from the elements of the environment? And then finally, on the infrastructure side, is it connected? Having an opportunity to work a lot in the rural South and the Midwest, we've built a lot of trails to nowhere. And not pointing the finger at anybody, but we're able to spin up and get a budget allocation or go to a partner and get some funding, and we built this trail on the edge of town that doesn't really connect to anything. I'm not saying that that's bad, but I'm saying that it's probably not going to be used as much as it could be if it were connected to a coffee shop, a school, church, employment center, college. And so building a network that's actually useful for people to be able to incorporate into their daily lives. On the culture side, we want to create a welcoming space. So some of the things there to think about is, I'm sorry, I'm a better door than a window. What policies are in place that support biking and walking? What programs are in place that target users of all ages and all abilities? And we'll talk about ways that in Northwest Arkansas in particular, that we've focused heavily on the culture side. Is it inclusive? Are the cultural barriers being addressed? In what ways are diverse voices at the table helping make decisions? And then finally, encouraging. Now, Bentonville has a lot of capital. We are a relatively wealthy area in Northwest Arkansas. We have 3 Fortune 500 companies, Walmart, Tyson Foods, J.B. Hunt. What a lot of people don't know is there's a whole nother story that 20 years ago or so, Walmart made a suggestion to every person that sells into them, every vendor that sells into them.
I'm just going to move the mic closer to you. You don't have to hold it. Just
Walmart made the suggestion to the vendor community that if you sell batteries, detergent, whatever, you need to have an office in Bentonville. So what that did was P&G, Kimberly-Clark, all of those vendor community moved to Northwest Arkansas. So that's where a lot of our growth came. Walmart has grown, but not so much corporate Walmart. The growth hasn't necessarily come from Walmart proper. A lot of that growth has come from that vendor community moving in, which has brought a ton of talent in, has brought a lot of capital in. Chances are, if you work for P&G, Walmart's your biggest account, right? And so their most talented people within those companies are coming to Northwest Arkansas. So there's a lot of capital converging. So all that to say, so another Lord of the long answer there, but all that to say, there's a lot of capital. We have a relatively wealthy region of 2 counties. And we have something there that frankly we coined called bike shaming. You guys may have it here as well. Bike or gear shaming. And we say that any bike is better than no bike any day. So, you know, you can spend $15,000, $20,000 on a bike if you want, and we have those people riding those bikes there. But in order to create a culture that's encouraging to people, we have to kind of eliminate some of those barriers and not have bike shaming or gear shaming. If you want to wear jean shorts and a t-shirt and ride a Walmart or a Target bike, come on, you're welcome. And so that there's some intentionality around that. We're going to unpack that a little bit more. But I want to hear from you. I want to hear some of your thoughts around this idea of creating strong communities or strong towns. What does that mean to you? How do you define that? When I say strong town or strong community, how do you define that? What are some of the attributes? Anyone?
Welcoming.
Okay.
Diverse population.
Diverse population, good. There's strength in diversity, strength in being welcoming. What else?
Schools
Mm-hmm.
in the center of communities.
Okay. Communities centered around or focused on schools.
Focused on
Mm-hmm. Education, yeah. What else?
I love what you said about trails to nowhere. The trail have to get somewhere. The whole point for me is I got to get somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So strength in a community would be a network that would allow you to connect by foot or by bike where you needed to go. Yes.
Multi-generational, inclusive of people at all stages of lifespan.
Yeah.
Didn't hear what you said.
Multi generations. So what I'm hearing is valuing perspectives from multiple generations.
But making it easy for kids to safely get to school, for elders to safely go to the store on their own power.
Yeah, that's good.
Making it safe.
Yeah. Amanda?
The people who work to make the community run and afford to live in the community. Yay!
Yeah. That's good. As I've been here a couple days, hearing that affordability and workforce housing is a challenge here, just like it is in Northwest Arkansas. I'm sure there's areas where affordability isn't as big of a challenge. I'm sure it's more challenging in certain areas, but we are definitely experiencing that in downtown Bentonville. Townhomes and standalone single-family homes are $400 a square foot. So if you're a barista at the bougie coffee shop, or you work at Dollar General, you know, you can't live there. I mean, I don't live in downtown Bentonville. I live, thankfully, on the kind of the upper northwest side of Bentonville, and was able to get that home 4 years ago before the prices went up. So affordability is important. That's good. Strength, that we have the ability to the people that are supporting, helping this city run, have the opportunity to actually live there. It's good. What else?
Diverse economies and thriving downtowns.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the
Darn it.
diverse economies.
So I'll provide a personal example and then continue on more conceptually. I grew up in mid-Michigan and all we had was GM. And so when GM went out, when industry left, there was a scramble. So having a variety of opportunities available for persons with a variety of different interests, right? It just makes us holistically better, not only economically, but just individually with our self-actualization and fulfillment.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah,
makes sense.
no, that's great. You know, had the opportunity to work in the Arkansas-Mississippi Delta for many years with philanthropy when I was with the Walton Family Foundation, and a lot of communities in the Arkansas-Mississippi Delta were what we call buffalo hunting. So they're going after the Toyota plant, the GM plant, or the, you know, and it's push all of our chips in for this large employer, spend however much money to recruit that employer in. What happens if they decide not to come, or they decide that it didn't work and they pull out? So we often say, you know, don't focus so much on buffalo hunting, try rabbit hunting, you know, and gather and pour into that small business community and create diversity there. So one more, strength of communities. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, population that really embodies vitality, positivity, and not the negative factor.
Yeah, yeah, we're open, is what I'm hearing you saying. We're open to ideas, we're open to innovation, and it's not just, we haven't always done it this way, and we're open to looking at new ways. Am I summarizing that? That's good. Yeah. Well, those are all great feedback, and as we ask this question in almost every session that we facilitate, similar answers: connectivity, diversity, housing, diverse economies. Those are very common answers, and those are all true. But there are some things that are holding us back as communities to get to where we really want to be in thriving and being resilient and being strong communities. And I would say that one of the things that holds us back is our built environment. And if we know all of that is true, we know that when we come into downtown Harrisonburg, there's a different feel. And it's great. I mean, my wife and I chose to stay in a little Airbnb right over here on Ash Tree Lane, and it's super cute, because we wanted to walk. We wanted that experience. Not that there's anything wrong with the hotels here, but we wanted more of a downtown. We wanted to kind of immerse ourselves in the local culture, if you will. But we have some challenges to that. So if all of that's true about strong communities, how did we get here to where this is much more familiar to us in rural America than the other? How did we get here? Anybody have any thoughts? I saw the money sign.
Money.
Yeah. What about that? What about the money led us to this type of development?
I think you have a lot of space and a lot of opportunity, and you exploit it till it's gone, and then you wake up and realize it's terrible, and you do the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of federal highway funding.
Federal highway funding? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Move away from local, like every single thing in that is a national chain.
Yeah.
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 White flight.
Yeah. White flag was a major and is a major factor in that. So we could probably spend the next 3 hours or next 3 days or even 30 years kind of discussing why this has become all too common and all too familiar with us. But what we do know is that there is a different way. There's a different way of building communities. And what's interesting about that is that it's, who's ever built a new home or had a new home built? My wife and I have had a couple built over the years. And it's no easy task. But who's ever remodeled a home? Yeah. Have you remodeled that home while you've lived in it? Yeah. That sucks. You know, remodeling a home when you live there and having to step over tile and plumbing and electric and all of that. What we're finding is in rural America, and frankly, all across the country, really, in more urbanized areas, we're having to remodel, right? We're having to go back to things that we knew were true at one point, that were really healthy for our communities, and for whatever reason, we kind of went a different direction. And it's not about pointing fingers and blaming and all of that, but a lot of our communities now are having to go back, and we're remodeling, and we're taking things back to the way that they were, because that's where the strength is, that's where the value is, and that's how we gain more connections. So 2 things I want to talk a little bit about is that the details matter. So when you're thinking about walking and biking in an active transportation network, it's really easy to focus at the 30,000-foot view and strategically, but oftentimes we can miss the fine details. What are some things that you notice, and feel free to just kind of popcorn it out, what are some things that you notice about the picture on the left-hand side, which is a state highway, crossing the state highway?
Crosswalk doesn't line up.
Crosswalk doesn't line up? Okay, yeah.
No side.
What's that?
No sidewalk on that side.
Yeah, so there's 2 schools just on the other side of the street here. Somebody designed this. Somebody, air quotes, somebody designed this. Somebody installed this. And this has been in place for probably 20 years. This is in Bentonville, Arkansas. So the details matter, and the ability to, we were in Strasbourg yesterday, and one of the council members there uses a mobility device. And you can bet that he was super engaged in this conversation and really wanting to, giving some feedback on this. And so these are the types of things that over the years that we've continued to build, and we've continued to, frankly, allow within our communities. And then we kind of scratch our heads and we say, how did we become so disconnected, right? And what I want to really empower you with is that your voice matters. Your voice and the way that you speak to city staff, the way that you talk to elected officials, your voice matters. And the fact that you're even here shows me that this type of development, this type of infrastructure matters to you. And we can make a difference on this. There's no reason that we should build sidewalks to nowhere. There's no reason that we have to continue to build back of curb sidewalk orientation and call this a complete street, or call this pedestrian, we have pedestrian facilities. I had a member of the DOT in another state, had a chance to do some training there, and came up after, and he was kind of scratching his head because he simply did not understand why that they needed to put a vegetative buffer between the back of curb and the sidewalk. So there's some things that we have to overcome as a group and as communities to help us get to that place where we want to be. So I'm an 80s kid. Grew up in the 80s, and I can't imagine a scenario where I could look at my mom and dad and say, will you take me to school? You walk, you can bike, or you can take the bus. Those are your options. I'm not going and waiting in line for 2 hours or dropping you off. I've got things to do, I've got work. It wasn't a thing for me when I grew up. How many of you have ever waited in a car line at school for your kids? As I have the opportunity to work across different communities, we've seen walking and biking to school decline significantly over recent years. And it's super easy to sit back and say, why aren't kids walking more? And then maybe not really take a look at the world that we've built. Take a look at the infrastructure, take a look at the culture that we've built. 2 more quick things, and then I'll kind of bring us up into how do we address this and what do we do about it. From a cultural standpoint, for all the work that you're doing here in this region, that we're doing, large organizations such as People for Bikes, NHTSA, and others around making walking and biking safer, and more accessible, we're seeing the trend lines move in a troubling direction. Pedestrian and cyclist deaths both reached decade highs in 2020. And you can see here on the bottom hand, this is one of the most troubling pieces of data that I've come across in all of my work. And it's most pedestrian deaths were reported to involve failure to yield right-of-way. So sometimes our first assumption is, well, yeah, those pedestrians, they're not yielding the right-of-way to the vehicle. This is actually speaking to vehicles not yielding the right-of-way to a pedestrian. So it could be in a crosswalk, could be a pedestrian walking on the shoulder. There could be lots of different scenarios, but more than 50% of pedestrian deaths involve a vehicle not yielding the right-of-way. So there's something culturally that's going on with us, maybe in this country, that's causing us that when we're in our vehicle, when we're on that roadway, we see the people outside of those vehicles as maybe less than human. And they are an impediment to me getting to work, to getting the kids to school, to soccer, whatever it is, they're an impediment. So there's some things that we can address culturally. Lastly, kind of circling back to the idea of connection. The Surgeon General produced a report this year called The Epidemic of Loneliness and Social Isolation. The Surgeon General they did studies over the last 20 to 30 years to show that we as humans, obviously, we need to connect with others. Isolation actually affects our health. And they're showing that by lacking social connection, it is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. That's a big deal. Couple points here. Social isolation has increased 24 hours per month. Social isolation has increased 24 hours per month, and social engagement is down 10 hours per month. So how do we address that? What do we do about it? And so in Northwest Arkansas, we knew that in order to address some of these elements, we needed to change the dynamic and really focus in on that infrastructure and the culture. So a little bit about Northwest Arkansas. We're 2 counties, about 500,000 people in 2 counties, Benton County in the north, Washington County in the south. Walmart is the anchor institution in the north. The University of Arkansas is the anchor institution. Hey, Torsha. Just saw you there. University of Arkansas is the anchor institution in the south, and about 500,000 people in 2 counties. So we had the opportunity to work when I was with the Walton Family Foundation. There was a group of stakeholders, much like this, that came together and said, let's figure out ways that we can unite this community. And one of the ways that they did that was through envisioning a trail, a 10-foot wide shared use paved path that was envisioned to be somewhere between 35 to 40 miles long. So mile 0 is at the bottom in Fayetteville, and mile 40 now is in Bella Vista. And so there was 9 miles in the north and 9 miles in the south that was already constructed. So there was this missing 15 to 16 miles in the middle of that. So we applied for a federal Tiger II grant, which was one of the early iterations of the RAISE grant. We received that. And from design to ribbon cutting, that was around 4 to 4.5 years that we completed 15 to 16 miles, which created then this physical connection between all of our communities. And the Greenway really kind of served as a bit of a catalyst for other biking and other infrastructure that was built out over time. I want to show just a very quick video that gives an overview of the Greenway.
So what most people don't don't know about Northwest Arkansas is we have this regional Razorback Greenway. It's a paved trail system and connecting all these communities together with one common trail that riders of all ages and skill levels can use. And there's a lot of people that are living with immediate access to this awesome regional resource that we have. One of the cool things about the trail system is Lewis and Clark's proximity to the trail. Feel free to come inside. We'll top you off with some cold water before you ride. Any other energy supplements or fuel that you're going to need for your ride. We can make sure your tires are topped off. Do a quick safety check if you need.
We were focused to make Arkansas a world-class mountain bike destination. We started back 10 years ago, and with the vision from Tom Walton and his brothers Stuart and James, they built a 5-mile trail system in Bentonville. And it's an area of town that is named Slaughter Pen Hollow, so it became Slaughter Pen Trail. And from there we have really seen this vision of the Walton brothers, and this is a cycling destination now.
So, early on when we started building, we realized that it was important to have a progressive-based trail system. So we started with more kind of beginner, intermediate level trails, and then over time we've sprinkled in more expert level stuff. As the trail system gained more and more popularity, we started getting more advanced riders naturally.
The fact that there is connectivity between all of the cities here in Northwest Arkansas. So when you travel and you're on the trails here in Bentonville, brings us such a large sense of community. So Bentonville goes from being a city upon itself to part of a much larger community. We have people riding to places that they never thought that they could do because the Greenway is right there for them to hop on and hop off, and it's just absolutely fabulous.
So as I mentioned, the Greenway served as a bit of a catalyst, and it was what we call the spine that allowed us to travel north-south, and really was kind of a test project, if you will. When we first started that project, we would have people calling in to the local radio show, kind of saying, why do we need a 10-foot wide sidewalk for 40 miles? That's a waste of money. To the point where most of our cities now are beginning to and have completed major connections, what we call kind of the arms and legs, the limbs of the system into their downtowns or into other strategic neighborhoods or areas. And they're taking that on themselves now through municipal budget allocations or applying for federal grants and things like that. And so that philanthropy really helped leverage a lot of the public investment, and the Greenway served as a bit of a catalyst for that. We started seeing some things that maybe we couldn't necessarily predict at the time. Realtors were having people approach them and saying, how do we find property along the Razorback Regional Greenway? And so in the early days, they started developing their own Facebook page where people could go and find property, and realtors, and that's now changed significantly where with Zillow, I think this was pre-Zillow, where if you pull up Bentonville, Fayetteville, Springdale, if it's within a mile of a trail system, within the first sentence, it will say located in or located adjacent to Kohler, located adjacent to downtown Springdale or Razorback Regional Greenway. We started seeing developers who recognized that when they positioned in walkable, bikeable areas that their vacancy rates were lower and that their lease rates could be higher. So they began to strategically locate along the Razorback Regional Greenway. Two examples of that are one in Fayetteville and one in Bentonville there. So as the Greenway came online, we also the region began to start making deeper investments into our mountain biking trail system. And with those investments, we started gaining attention from kind of odd places that we couldn't expect. This is sleepy little Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, Arkansas. We're starting to show up in very progressive urban planning publications such as City Lab, talking about bikes being the best friend in Arkansas or bike's best friend is Walmart. We hosted the IMBA World Summit where 900 mountain bikers from around the world came in to ride our trails. We're starting to show up in places like Bike Magazine, Outside Magazine. We were able to host the Cyclocross World Championships. And this was all attention that, frankly, was somewhat kind of unexpected, that the investment in that really helped drive that. We talked about this yesterday. I won't spend as much time on this. But there's a town in northwest Arkansas that the Greenway is intentionally routed through. It's Springdale, Arkansas. Springdale is our most diverse community. It's about 70,000 people. We have a heavy ag culture there. We actually have one of the country's largest rodeos that's about a mile from downtown. So heavy ag with poultry and cattle. We also have one of our region's largest Hispanic populations in Springdale. And then we also have the country's largest concentration of people from the Marshall Islands in Springdale. And so in Springdale, downtown Springdale in particular, it was really struggling. It had almost kind of caved in on itself and it had almost died about 2013, 2014, until the Raceback Regional Greenway was intentionally routed through downtown Springdale. And it's completely changed the dynamic because it's introduced Springdale to a whole new population, a whole new group of people. We're starting to see high-rise, modern, dense housing come up in Springdale, a thriving business community that was really built around the Greenway. So let's talk a bit about the culture side. When I had the opportunity to join the Walton Family Foundation in 2011, there were less than a handful of us that were working to grow biking and the culture and in the nonprofit and the public space. So that doesn't count like bike shops and for-profit entities and whatnot. And the intentionality around the infrastructure was very, very important. But there was also, we understood, the region understood that there was this intentionality and strategy that needed to be coupled around culture and growing the culture. And so today there's over 100 different people working in the nonprofit and the public space to produce programming, to encourage people to ride. Just a couple quick examples of that. NICA, you guys are familiar with NICA, the National Interscholastic Cycling Association. So it's basically schools have teams of mountain bike teams that they create and they compete. NICA has been a big deal for us. I think we have 1,000 kids in the state who are part of NICA teams. Things like Women of Oz. We grew our mountain biking system to have nearly 600 miles of mountain biking trails. But let's face it, mountain biking has traditionally been a white male-dominated sport. And so there were women in Northwest Arkansas that said, we want to ride too. And so they created a safe space for them to come together and to ride, and to teach people to ride. Arkansas Latinas in BC is a similar mission to Women of Oz, but focused on Latinas. Pedal It Forward is an organization that takes in bikes, donated bikes. They refurbish those and they give those bikes out to people in need. So there's an entire culture that's been really built out in Northwest Arkansas to create that welcoming, inclusive, and encouraging environment. So just some special mention projects, and a few of you may have been here before. But then once we got that baseline of infrastructure built, then there was this opportunity to play with it a little bit, right? And so created special places like the Kohler Mountain Bike Preserve. It's 300 acres located 2 miles from downtown Bentonville that has roughly 20 miles of purpose-built mountain biking trails and hiking trails, and then a 2-mile linear greenway that goes right down through the middle. And what's interesting about Kohler is that there is a coffee shop that's located 1 mile in on that greenway that is only accessible by foot or by bike. You can't drive there. So when this was envisioned, they put out an RFP for vendors to this coffee shop, and they had 2. Because at that time, who could have imagined that a coffee shop that you couldn't drive to would be successful? And this has now become a probably one of the most visited outdoor destinations in all of Northwest Arkansas. And it has become a thing now where people will walk and bike to the coffee shop that's only accessible by foot or by bike. And I wanted to show this quick slide here because I think it really shows, this is a random, Tuesday morning at 10:30. And while Kohler is known as the mountain bike preserve, what do you notice about this slide? Stroller. Yeah, you notice a stroller. You notice some multi-generational aspects there. So what we found was a bit of a surprise is that the majority of users at Kohler are not bikers. Now we have a healthy cycling population that comes there, but the majority of users are on foot. So then as that infrastructure grew and we gained a little bit more notoriety, we started seeing this business community, entrepreneurial community that started catering to the biking community. It's not just the mountain biking community. 37 North, which is about creating and guiding experiences with about 70% of their customer base is women, where they will take people into the outdoors on guided experiences and curate the entire experience. The Hub, Pedal Kids USA, which is focused on teaching youngsters 2 and 3 years old how to ride Strider bikes. Aussie Bikes, rental companies, Lives and Pants, which I happen to be wearing today. They do make them big enough for me. And all of these entities really kind of were birthed out of this idea of connectivity within our community. And so now we're in a place where, and this map grows every day, where Northwest Arkansas went from 15 years ago, we had maybe 25 to 30 miles of shared use penny paths, to now we have over 200. And a growing on-street infrastructure network of protected bike lanes. And we have over 600 miles of mountain bike and hiking and multi-use trails there as well. So for us, not saying that this necessarily has to be your story, but we knew that for us, we needed to be able to compete on a global scale for talent. And when we say the word Arkansas, when Walmart is calling on a potential candidate that lives in Ohio or Virginia or somewhere else to come and work for them, or Tyson or J.B. Hunt says, "I want you to come work for us," and the candidate says, "Where are you located?" and we say Arkansas, that rolls off the tongue a little bit differently than other states. And so we had some challenges that we needed to overcome in making a great place to live, work, and play. And I would say that it's worked for us. It's worked. Because what's really special is that while a lot of these early investments were catalyzed by private philanthropy, we're at a place now where our community has fully embraced that. And we're seeing that the 25 different cities that make up Northwest Arkansas, we're seeing now that they are taking this up and they are including this in their municipal budgets, and they're applying for grants, and they're building this network out because their residents are demanding that. So we had an opportunity in 2017 to, not we, but the Walton Family Foundation had an opportunity to conduct a survey, or a study, if you will, to measure the economic impact of biking in Northwest Arkansas. In 2 counties, they were able to show that biking generates $137 million a year in annual benefits. So that's not a cumulative figure. That's not a one-time figure. That is a yearly or annual figure that biking benefits our community $137 million. 86 million of that is in healthcare related costs, so we know if we're biking, walking, we're more active, we're going to the doctor less. And then another 51 million of that was in direct business benefits. So 137 million. Biking, walking, mobility, connectivity has been a huge deal for us in Northwest Arkansas. We've had some unique circumstances, a confluence of circumstances, if you will, private philanthropy, a thriving business community, and an open municipal culture, if you will, to that. And it's really helped change the dynamic for us, and it's generating significant impact. I've got maybe a couple minutes here, and then we'll have a chance to, I'm not leaving, we're going to have some facilitated discussion, and then I'll add some color and context around some different things as we move on. But one of the things, and many of you will recognize this and be familiar with this, when I say the word cyclist, what is the image that comes to mind? What are the mental images that come to mind?
Spandex.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. What else? Mammals, yeah. Yeah. What else? Other mental images?
Lawbreaker.
Lawbreaker, okay, yeah. Sometimes I hear the word menace, yeah. So for most of you, and in most of the groups that we ask that question to, this is probably the mental image that comes to mind. So as you are embarking on growing connectivity here in Harrisonburg and the Shenandoah Valley, words matter. And so you're going to be needing to enroll the community for support. You're going to be needing to talk to elected officials. You're going to be needing to engage the community. One simple thing that you can do as you're talking about your active transportation network, try as best as you can to distance yourself from allowing this mental image to creep in as the user group. Okay? So what happens when I say a person on a bike or a bike rider? What's the mental image?
Kid.
What is it? Wide open?
It's wide open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Riding to school.
Riding to school? Yeah. For most of us, it probably looks a little bit like this, right? So when we think about active transportation network, sometimes the conversation can get a little hijacked. And it can really be about a cyclist, the kid, the bike, the Lycra. Those people matter too, right? We're not trying to intentionally exclude them. We're actually trying to broaden the perspective. We're actually trying to broaden the definition of the active transportation user beyond just this person. And thinking about people who need to walk to work. The access to transportation, for most of us, can be an inconvenience. So if you go to your car in the morning and you go to turn your car on and it doesn't start, well, for most of us, it's an inconvenience. We probably have some cash. We can call the tow company. We can put it on a credit card if we don't have cash, or we can call a friend. We have other resources. But there are people that are living in the valley that when they go to turn their car over in the morning, it doesn't start. Things begin to start unraveling in their life pretty quickly. So if we can introduce options, and as we build that network, it's not just about this person, it's about walkers, it's about bikers, it's about people on bikes. And so just that little vernacular change and really helping broaden that definition will really help as you engage in the community. I'm out of time, but I'm not leaving. Kyle and I are going to wrestle for 5 more minutes.
All right, yeah, that wouldn't end well. So we are going to do a quick Q&A, Ryan, so please stay right up here. So we're going to do a short Q&A, have a break, and then we'll do our facilitated sessions where we'll come in and out of our small groups, and Ryan will be responding up here, so we still have plenty of time to engage with Ryan, ask questions. So for the facilitated part today, as with past summits, we're working with JMU's Institute for Constructive Advocacy and Dialogue, ICAD, and Dr. Rob Alexander is going to be leading the Q&A, and we're so grateful to have you part of the summit again, Rob.
It's great to be a collaborator. It's so fun for us to see so many people in the room, so many organizations and entities that we work with, that we help support. Briefly, ICAT is an independent institute at JMU. We exist to help elevate the quality of talk that happens in our organizations, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and to build capacity. So I've recruited a number of people to be facilitators today because I'm testing to see how much capacity has been built for you. So thanks for being willing to do that. We're about to move into some Q&A for Ryan. We have a few minutes for that. I'm going to really push you to think about clarifying questions. What are things that Ryan has presented that you need to know more about so that you can better think about how does what the Northwest Arkansas experience, what can potentially apply for us here in Harrisonburg and Rockingham County, thinking about the needs, the interests, the visions that you all have elevated in past summits within your planning documents and going forward from today. So Kyle gave you a brief sense. After the Q&A, I'll be giving you some more instructions about what's going to happen after the break. But it's a summit. We're here to talk and generate ideas and maybe even make some commitments of what are some immediate next steps. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and raise your hand if you have a clarifying or probing question. I'm going to maybe stack a little bit here to see if we can't capture a bunch of questions. You'll hear them, and then we'll do maybe 3 at a time. So we'll go 1 and Laura number 2, and then 3 right here, and then we'll do a second round after that. So what's your question? Yes?
So my question is, as you were talking about the inclusivity piece, I would like to have a little bit more about how that works. For those folks who are homeless or almost homeless, that are really struggling along, how does this plan kind of include them to be able to use the Greenway, to get bikes, to have access to the resources that they need to be successful in their own lives? Because I know for my mind, that's the piece that always seems to be a little bit left out.
Okay, great. So one question around inclusivity, particularly around those that experience homelessness may not have access to bikes. Thank you. Laura, question.
You mentioned elected officials. I am one. I'm Laura Dent, the vice mayor. I'm running for re-election, shameless plug. And I got here on my bike, and one of my main concerns in town is the connectivity. I'll be riding along in a bike line perfectly happy in a lane, and then it ends. And then I'm fighting with traffic and risking my life. What do you recommend for us elected officials to promote as policies for safety and bike downtown?
Okay, so recommendations for elected officials, particularly around safety and connectivity within the denser community. And then 3.
I guess really it's that, how do you keep growth from being a terrible liberal word to a rural community? How do you balance where you have basically conflicting, what gets called politics, but is more about space and growth and how growth can be a bad word.
So thinking about the rhetoric, particularly in a rural community where growth may be something that people will just resist, and so what might be some reframing? All right, you got those 3 in your head? Okay.
Ready for me to dive in?
Yeah.
Okay. So, creating access and inclusivity for all in a community. The fact of the matter is that, to quote Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park, life finds a way. You've got to get your kids to school. You've got to get to your job. And so people are walking. Now, oftentimes they can be called the invisible people. They might be on a night shift at the factory. They're walking or biking on a busy roadway where there is no infrastructure. And so that's part of the equation to the increase in pedestrian and bicyclist deaths, is because life goes on. Life finds a way. I have to get to my office. I have to get to my job. I have to get my kids to school. But oftentimes there's not safe infrastructure there. The conversation around the unhoused is a frequent conversation that we have with communities that. Okay. The conversation around homelessness or the unhoused is a frequent conversation that comes up with cities. I don't know that there's a user group in your community that needs infrastructure more than than that group would. Right? So typically, there's lots of context around this, so I don't want to overgeneralize, but chances are if you're unhoused, you probably don't have a car either, okay? And so the ability to move, to get services, to access potential upward mobility is based on your ability to move around the community. So how you do that within each individual community has to be customized to that particular community. There has to be engagement with that community to understand what their needs are, where the resources are, and tailoring a plan for that. So, okay, the second was
elected officials.
So oftentimes we can see in communities, we can see bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure as a nice to have versus essential infrastructure. And that's a major shift for a lot of communities because we have, as a country, we've become very reliant on a single form of transportation. Now it's not about eliminating, I'm not anti-car. I plan to own a vehicle. I'd like to be less reliant on it. I'd like for there to be other options for me to choose to use. But I think a lot of that is about giving dignity to people in a community who need to or choose to walk or bike. If you have a roadway that stopped and didn't connect, how many calls do you think that you would get as a vice mayor? Yeah, but for some reason, we have a bit of a double standard when it comes to bicycle infrastructure because we oftentimes don't view it as essential. It's a bit of a, we call it a vitamin. My wife encourages me often to take different supplements and things like that, and she says, well, I keep laying them out for you and you don't take them. I forget or whatever. But if you are in serious pain, you're going to take a painkiller because you want that pain to stop so that you can function, and that feels essential. And I think that's oftentimes what happens is, well, why don't you guys go try that? You can test that out. You can just put in some temporary measures to, let's don't necessarily invest fully in that. Let's try it out. And it becomes something that's not essential to a community. So what I would say for you as an elected official, prioritize that essential infrastructure and continue to refer to that as essential infrastructure, not just something that kind of gets relegated to, it's a nice to have, maybe we'll try that type of mentality, because you wouldn't do that on a roadway. Any other infrastructure that we do, we would never allow that. It would never be accepted. On sewer infrastructure, a water line, would it ever stop? I hope not. So, growth. Boy, I believe in the city sense, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I believe that in the rural South and the Midwest, that the playing field has been more level, or is more level now than it has ever been post-COVID. And communities, rural communities across the country, are now able to compete for talent who can work remotely. If you work for Salesforce, you're making whatever that salary is. Let's just use the figure, $250,000, $300,000 working for Salesforce. Your cost of living in San Francisco for a loft apartment in the Embarcadero is a whole lot more than it is in downtown Harrisonburg. But with Salesforce, you have the opportunity to choose. You can work in their Salesforce tower, or you can work remotely. And a lot of people are choosing where they want to live, keeping that salary where it's at, and having a lower cost of living, and having a higher quality of life. And so, my thoughts are, is if you're not growing, you're dying. And so how do you continue to grow in the right way? I was talking to Councilmember Monica earlier. We were talking about engagement. Engaging early and often in helping shape the community in the right direction. Because, if you're not growing, you're dying.
All right, let's stack a couple more questions. Kim, Rod, and your hand was up also in the first round, Chris. We'll do 3 more and see what happens. Kim.
How do you deal with gentrification?
So the gentrification challenge of this kind of infrastructure.
It's the flip side of the economic development.
Okay, everyone hear that? Great. Rod?
Adjacent landowners to the beginnings of the bike trail, back in the early days when y'all got this thing in the way, what objections did you hear and how did you meet and overcome those objections?
So objections, NIMBYs around the rural trailheads and crossings of a rail trail. Chris?
Still my question, what were the levels of opposition and how were they overcome?
Okay, let's add Brian in. Brian, what's your question?
The story that I heard was that, let me back up. So once you have a core infrastructure, the culture starts to evolve around it and entrepreneurial things start to be drawn to it because it works, it's successful. And I heard that in Northwest Arkansas, there was a lot of money and a lot of momentum around making the whole thing happen, this whole spine happen all at once. So that's not really the case in most communities. It's more dispersed, where we build a little here and a little there and a bike lane over there. How do we overcome that lack of this, boom, here it is, and then let it grow from its own?
You have your 3 questions? Okay, thanks.
Gentrification. I don't know that across the country, I don't know that anybody is necessarily doing that well. I mean, it's a challenge for sure. I heard probably the best approach on this that I've heard is from a gentleman named Jan Gale, Gale and Associates. He was one of the early architects and planners in Copenhagen, Denmark. And I think the goal would be to create more special places for everybody across the city. It's easy for, so as we think about, let's not, having an approach citywide, I think sometimes we can focus efforts in one area and we can see gentrification happen in that one area, and we see city infrastructure, we see resources that follows that. But I think having a plan, a comprehensive plan across the community for how to improve spaces across the community can help address some of that. So, the second question was opposition. I would say that there has been some opposition in the community in the early days. I can think about a community, Rod, you may have heard me talk about this yesterday. There's a community in Bella Vista, Arkansas. There was a plan to put in roughly 100 miles of new mountain bike trails there. And early on, the community was very resistant to that. The mayor, who's mid-60s from Canada, just a fantastic gentleman, he was able to dig deep and find what were some of the motivating factors to this predominantly retirement community. And so he was able to talk to them a little bit about, you know, what is your number one wealth generating asset that you have? For most of us, it's our home. And so he was able to overcome some of those early objections through kind of finding what those motivating factors are. But every project is going to have different reasons why people oppose it. And I would highly recommend that on any plan or any project, don't shy away from the negative comments. Had a chance to work with a lot of elected officials over the last 12 to 13 years, and there's this feeling that we're going to try to avoid some of that. We're going to try to diminish some of that negative feedback or negativity around a certain project. And I would say lean into it. I would say lean into it, build relationships and build trust. Doesn't necessarily always have to be done. And I would highly recommend that it not be done on an open mic. But go to that person's business. Step into their business. Buy a cup of coffee. Buy whatever they're selling. and sit down and build a relationship. And chances are you may not have consensus, but you might be able to leave there with buy-in. So that was the opposition question, and there was...
Brian, can you restate your question again?
Maybe. So Northwest Arkansas has put in this huge spine of trail, and that naturally attracts businesses and people walking and all the things. But you kind of start with a lot of capital. Boom, put this thing down.
Thank you.
And then the momentum grows. So most communities don't have that big initial investment. How do you do it piecemeal?
Yeah, that's good. And I say this, there was a confluence of circumstances there. And the Walton Family Foundation is a one-of-one. Like you likely don't have a Walton Family Foundation size organization here in Shenandoah Valley. But you likely have a coalition of smaller organizations who, with the right vision and the right game plan, may be able to come together and fund particular projects. But it's developing that coalition, I think, is very important. I think being willing to look at kind of some unique, you're going to have to build whatever you want to build, you're going to have to do that incrementally. But being strategic about how that's built, where it's built, why it's built, and focusing on, for instance, we're working in a community in Northwest Arkansas that has a lot of challenges. It's had relatively stagnant growth over the last 40 years. So there's not an in-migration of new thought, new leaders. It's been relatively static growth. And so our focus has been, with those limited resources, where can we have the most impact? And for us in the city, it's focusing on schools. Focusing those efforts there and improving signage, improving crosswalks, improving infrastructure, and getting more kids walking and biking. So developing a coalition, developing a group of funders, and having a compelling vision. Very few funders today fund legacy projects like they used to, but it's much more about finding things that they can invest in that will have a measurable impact, and they're going to ask you to report on that impact. And so developing a coalition. You may have a community foundation here, so working with community foundation and others might be a way to do that. So I know that much context about the community, but that's some general thoughts.
We have time for 2 more questions, and I notice I've been looking this direction, so we're going to stack 2 more together. So we'll go Don. Great, awesome. Great, Don first, please.
Yes, the Shenandoah Rail Trail has an economic impact, and I often said that it will be paid for in the short run by the tourists coming here. In the long run, it'll be paid for by the health benefits. But you put the health benefits in less than 10 years as more than 60% of your economic impact. How did you do that?
Okay, that's one question. Second question.
Okay, my question has to do in a way with engagement. But if you look around the room, we're very white today, which is fine. But other than my sisters to the left, I was beginning to feel no one else of color would show up. How do we encourage members of our very diverse community to be more interested, more involved, more bike-friendly, so that as we develop and have economic opportunities like you were talking about, where they strategically place the bike lane through this town where the downtown was pretty much gone, so that we're not economically disadvantaged or out of the game way from the beginning. So like, how do we get more involvement at this level? How do we get folks in the community to become involved in an activity that, for me, hasn't been beyond riding as a small child, a way of being transported from place to place? That just doesn't happen in my community.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is, I might also ask for you to give us some feedback on how do we give us some feedback on how do we engage your community and have your community feel welcome and feel safe in these types of spaces where they can come and offer feedback. Some things that I know that our firm is doing to be intentional around that are when we do a public engagement session, number one, don't do it at City Hall, right? Like, we all need to recognize that not each one of us has a different relationship with City Hall than the other. So have it in a city park, have it at the Boys and Girls Club, have it in the evening, and be intentional about that. Ms. Monica, we were talking earlier, we set up a public engagement session in City Park, MLK Park, in the city of Fort Smith. And we had boards, kind of the typical planning session. We had boards and things. And we did bring pizza and food, and we had a movie time set up for the kids where parents could come and engage, but yet the kids had something to do. And I remember a lady walked up to me. I said, "Hey, how you doing? Glad you guys are here." And she looked at me and she said, "Are y'all really going to do anything? Is this really going to have any kind of an impact on our community?" Because how many Ryan Hales has her community seen come into her community, whether it's through a comp plan or an active transportation plan 10 years ago, or you name it. It's not, I'm sharing with this with you earlier, it's not my lived experience, you know, as a white man, but it is my learned experience from communities that there's a sense of apathy there, that nothing is going to change, that, you know, we've sat through this planning process, that planning process, what's going to change? So I think it's a lot about building relationships. I think it's a lot about stepping outside of large public engagement sessions and actually going and building relationships one-on-one with people and building trust. But it's probably more, I'm not meaning to be controversial at all or push back on you at all. It's probably more appropriate for you to tell us, how do we engage your community? I think Harrisonburg, you shared with me that you have a very diverse town council with 3 African-American ladies. Yeah, I mean, that's remarkable. Congratulations. And so I think I have some ideas of ways that we feel like we're being effective, but it'd probably be best for you to tell us, how do we engage your community, and then for us to really listen and take steps in that direction.
And then Ryan, a question about health benefits in 10 years that Donna asked. Just a quick reaction, response to that.
Donna, I'm not sure I fully understood the question. Could you restate that?
Your economic impact analysis had $86 million of it was related. Health related. That's wonderful. That's why I'm in this.
Yeah.
But I can't measure that for 10 or 15 years. We do a survey every 5 years in terms of Centera or Valley Health System does these surveys that show us how many people are obese, how many people are hypertensive, how many diabetics you have in these zip codes. That's how I would measure it over 15 or 20 years. But you did it in 10 years and showed this remarkable.
First of all, I want to state, I didn't do that. The community did. Our company didn't do that. So they were able to, evaluation is a thing, is an industry. Doctorate level people put together the evaluation protocol for that. And we'll share that with Kyle. We'll build a shared file. We'll share that study with you. And you can dig into the details in their protocol for how they chose to measure that and track it.
Good point.
And as Ryan said, he's not going anywhere. So in a moment, you're going to be released for a 15, 20-ish minute break, where there's a couple things that we need to do. One, attack him with more questions. So continue the conversation. He is staying through our breakout sessions, and we're going to use him in the breakout sessions, all right? So I apologize if your question didn't get asked in the large group format. If you could clear the decks of your tables with plates, keep the things you want to use for the rest of the morning. We'll have separate items for lunch. I believe that right now for the space, it's all throwaway, but if you are heading down towards downtown, City Hall parking lot has compost bins, the plates for sure, the napkins can be composted. I encourage you to think about carting some of that away yourself. When you come back from the break, first of all, I'm really good at having obnoxious things that make sound just much better than trying to shout over everyone. So when we hear that, you know it's about time to come back to the table and really dig into, all right, what does any of this mean for you, for us, for this community, for the county, for the region? I know that there's people in the room who are not specifically from here. You have knowledge and understanding that's also relevant. So we're going to dig into some of this to figure out what can be done here. What can we do a little bit differently now that we'll start to see some of these outcomes and to actually generate some positive direction. So when you come back to tables, your challenge is this. Okay, first fill in a table first, and then strive to have at least one close collaborator with you and at least 2 to 3 new people, people who aren't your collaborators. So really think about, be intentional about who you're sitting down with so we can maximize the creative energy that's in the room. We recognize that some of you need to step away for the rest of your professional day. If that's the case, we're so grateful that you were here, at least through Ryan's talk. Please be sure to check in with the materials and the conveners before you go, just if there's any other follow-up that you would like to have from the summit. And when we come back, I will make sure that we're going to be, all the tables will be set up for our discussions, and I'll give some instructions after the break. So if my facilitation team of 3 over there could come on up to me during the break, that'd be great. We'll see you in 15-ish minutes. Thank you. All right.
Plugged into all of the federal stuff.